What if I told you that the choices you make today, what you eat, how you move, what time you wake up, even how you think, can literally rewrite the expression of your genes? I'm not speaking metaphorically, I mean biologically. For decades we believed that our genes were fixed, like a blueprint handed down from our parents, locked in stone. But the science of epigenetics has shattered that belief. Your behavior right now in real time is influencing how your genes function. In this talk, I'm going to walk you through how everyday actions backed by neuroscience have the power to switch genes on or off, and how you can use this to take control of your health, your brain, and your future. This is the science of self-directed evolution. Asterisk, every behavior we engage in, whether conscious or unconscious, sends signals to our biology, and at the most fundamental level, those signals don't just affect our mood, our energy, or our performance for the day. They influence which parts of our DNA get read and transcribed into action. In other words, behavior is biology in motion. Let me explain what that actually means. Inside each one of your cells, you carry the same set of DNA, the same genetic code, but not every cell does the same job. A brain cell acts differently from a liver cell, which acts differently from a skin cell. This happens because different genes are turned on or off in different cell types. What we've learned over the past 2 decades is that this turning on and off isn't just hardwired at birth, it's actively shaped by the environment, and more specifically by your behavior. This is the realm of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the science of how behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. These changes don't alter the DNA sequence itself, but they do affect how cells read those genes. You can think of your DNA like a grand piano with 23,000 keys. Epigenetics is the way you play that piano. You might have the same keys as someone else, but what matters is the melody you produce, what genes are expressed, and when and how often. And behavior is one of the most powerful conductors of that melody. When you engage in a particular behavior, say you exercise, you eat a certain kind of food, or you experience stress, your body responds chemically. These chemical changes can cause modifications to your epigenome, which acts like a switchboard or a volume control panel for your genes. Molecules such as methyl groups or histones determine whether a gene gets activated or silenced. If your body perceives danger, for example, it will trigger stress-related pathways, increasing expression of genes associated with inflammation or vigilance. On the other hand, if you take time to rest, breathe deeply, or expose yourself to natural light in the morning, you can initiate the expression of genes related to cellular repair, focus, and immune function. The key insight here is this: behavior is not simply a result of your genes, it is also a modifier of your genes. This flips the old model on its head. We used to think of DNA as a fixed script, but it's more accurate to think of it as a responsive living document, one that changes its tone and emphasis depending on what you do, what you feel, and even what you believe. That's why 2 people with the same genetic risk for something like cardiovascular disease or depression can live radically different lives depending on how they sleep, how they move, what they eat, and how they manage stress. This is not speculative or fringe science. We have hundreds of studies showing how lifestyle behaviors influence gene expression. People who practice meditation daily, for example, show measurable epigenetic changes in genes related to inflammation, pain regulation, and even aging. Individuals who engage in consistent aerobic exercise show increased expression of genes tied to brain growth and neuroplasticity. Diets high in refined sugar and processed fats, on the other hand, can activate genes linked to metabolic dysfunction and inflammation. What this all points to is a stunning truth: your behavior is a dialogue with your genome. Every action you take, whether you choose to go outside in the morning or scroll your phone in bed, whether you decide to move your body or stay still, whether you react with stress or respond with calm, is communicating with your biology at the level of gene expression. You're not just making a choice for today, you're shaping the way your genes show up tomorrow. Sleep is not merely a state of rest, it is one of the most powerful and evolutionarily conserved tools your body has for regulating gene expression. During the day, your body and brain are in a constant state of interaction with the external world. You're processing stimuli, making decisions, burning energy, and accumulating cellular wear and tear. But it's during sleep, especially deep sleep, that your body activates systems for repair, restoration and regulation at the genetic level. Sleep is not passive, it's an active high-precision biological reset. And it's the time when your genes engage in some of their most important work. What we now understand from neuroscience and chronobiology is that sleep is intimately connected to how your genes are expressed. In fact, over 3,000 genes, roughly 10% of the human genome, are regulated by the circadian rhythm, the 24-hour internal clock that governs the timing of sleep and wakefulness. This rhythm is driven by a tiny structure in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, located in the hypothalamus. It synchronizes with external cues, like light and darkness, and in turn regulates gene expression in nearly every cell of your body. When you sleep at the right time, aligned with your circadian biology, your body activates a cascade of genetic processes. These include the release of growth hormone, which supports tissue repair and cellular regeneration, and the activation of genes involved in detoxification pathways, particularly in the liver and brain. Deep sleep, or slow-wave sleep, is especially critical. It's during this stage that the glymphatic system in your brain, essentially your brain's waste clearance mechanism, flushes out toxins like beta amyloid, a protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. These processes rely heavily on the proper timing and structure of sleep, and they're governed by genetic instructions that are only executed when sleep is adequate and consistent. But sleep doesn't just help maintain healthy function, it also serves as a kind of genetic editor. Imagine your DNA as a script that's being read and rewritten based on your biological needs. During sleep, the body performs a kind of proofreading function, scanning for errors in DNA replication, repairing damaged cells, and activating genes that suppress tumor growth. Inadequate sleep, by contrast, disrupts these processes. In fact, studies show that even a single night of sleep deprivation can alter the expression of over 700 genes, many of which are involved in inflammation, immune response, stress regulation, and metabolism. These aren't minor shifts. They are significant changes in how your body functions at the cellular level. Perhaps one of the most striking findings in recent years comes from research on telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes that are closely tied to aging. Shorter telomeres are associated with chronic diseases, cellular aging, and early death. People who consistently get too little sleep show increased telomere shortening, a clear sign that lack of sleep is accelerating their biological aging. Conversely, individuals who prioritize sleep tend to have more stable telomeres and better gene regulation across the board. Sleep also affects the hormonal systems that interact with gene expression. For example, when you don't sleep enough, levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, remain elevated. This elevation can increase the expression of genes related to inflammation and fat storage, while decreasing genes associated with insulin sensitivity and cellular repair. Over time, this imbalance contributes to conditions like obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, not because of your DNA alone, but because your behavior has changed how that DNA is being expressed. Light exposure plays a critical role here as well. The quality of your sleep begins the moment you wake up. Getting sunlight early in the day helps set your circadian rhythm, which influences when melatonin, a key sleep hormone, is released at night. Melatonin itself is deeply involved in regulating gene activity, particularly in the brain, immune system, and reproductive tissues. Without proper light exposure in the morning and darkness at night, melatonin production is impaired, and so is the genetic signaling that depends on it. This means that behavior around sleep, when you go to bed, whether you look at screens before sleeping, how much light you get in the morning, is not just about sleep quality, it's about gene quality. These small behavioral shifts ripple through your biology in profound ways. In a very real sense, sleep is the most accessible and potent gene therapy available to us. It's free, it's natural, and it's entirely within our control, and yet many of us treat it as optional, as if cutting sleep is a form of efficiency. But what the science clearly shows is that without enough sleep, the very foundation of your biology begins to fray. Your genes lose their rhythm, your repair systems slow down, your brain's ability to function, focus, and remember begins to fade. On the other hand, when you honor your biology and give your body the sleep it needs, you're not just resting, you're activating one of the most powerful systems for genetic renewal ever discovered. You're literally writing a healthier version of yourself, one night at a time. Exercise is often thought of as something we do to improve our physique, lose weight, or boost our energy. And while all of that is true, the science now shows us something even more profound. Exercise changes us at the molecular level. It directly influences how our genes are expressed. Every time you move your body, you are engaging in a kind of internal dialogue with your genome, sending signals that activate powerful biological processes. This isn't just about fitness, it's about reprogramming your biology in real time. When you begin to exercise, even with a brisk walk or light resistance training, your muscles contract, your heart rate increases, and your breathing deepens. These physical changes generate a cascade of biochemical signals that travel throughout the body. These signals reach the nuclei of your cells, where your DNA resides, and begin to alter gene expression. What's extraordinary is how specific this response is. Within minutes of exercise, genes related to inflammation, energy metabolism, and cellular repair begin to shift. Some are switched on, others are silenced. It's a complex, beautifully orchestrated response that rewires your biology toward growth, healing, and resilience. One of the most well-documented effects of exercise on gene expression occurs in your skeletal muscles. When you perform any kind of physical activity, your muscles undergo small amounts of stress, micro-tears and tension, that the body interprets as a need for adaptation. In response, genes related to muscle growth, strength, and mitochondrial function become active. Mitochondria, the energy factories inside your cells, begin to multiply and function more efficiently. This not only improves physical performance, but enhances your capacity to generate energy at a cellular level. That means you feel more energetic, more focused, and more resilient, because your cells are literally producing more energy for you to use. But the changes don't stop at the muscles. Perhaps even more profound are the effects of exercise on the brain. When you engage in sustained physical activity, especially aerobic exercise like running, cycling, or swimming, your brain increases production of a molecule called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF acts like fertilizer for your neurons. It promotes the growth of new brain cells, strengthens connections between existing ones, and enhances synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, learn, and change. What's remarkable is that the expression of the BDNF gene is directly influenced by physical activity. The more you move, the more you stimulate the release and activation of this powerful neurotrophin. And this translates into better memory, faster learning, and improved emotional resilience. Exercise also has a profound effect on mood, not just in terms of the neurochemicals like dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, which are often discussed, but also through gene expression pathways that regulate inflammation and stress response. Chronic low-grade inflammation has been linked to nearly every major disease, from depression to cardiovascular illness to cognitive decline. Exercise turns off the genes that drive inflammatory pathways and activates those that promote anti-inflammatory responses. It's a natural antidepressant and anti-aging intervention built into your biology, requiring nothing more than movement to activate. Even a single session of exercise can lead to immediate shifts in gene expression. Studies show that after just 20 minutes of moderate activity, hundreds of genes begin to change their activity. Over time, with consistent physical activity, these changes become more stable and integrated, leading to long-term improvements in metabolic function, cardiovascular health, and brain performance. In essence, you're building a new biological identity, one that's stronger, faster, more resilient, and more mentally agile. What's also fascinating is that these gene expression changes aren't isolated to the person exercising. Emerging research suggests that exercise can produce epigenetic changes that are passed on to offspring. In animal studies, mice that exercised before conception had offspring with enhanced brain development and improved metabolic profiles. This hints at the possibility that our behavior can influence the genetic health of future generations. You're not just improving your own biology, you may be altering the biological potential of those who come after you. All of this underscores a powerful truth. Your body is designed to adapt to its environment, and movement is one of the most fundamental environmental signals it responds to. When you exercise, you are not simply burning calories or building muscle. You are reshaping your genetic expression in ways that profoundly influence every system in your body. Your brain becomes sharper, your immune system more robust, your metabolism more efficient, and your emotional state more stable. And perhaps most importantly, exercise gives you agency over your own biology. You don't need a prescription, a supplement, or a specialized protocol. You need consistency. You need effort. Every step you take, every movement you make, becomes an act of molecular transformation. You are not stuck with the genes you were born with. You are in a dynamic, ongoing conversation with your DNA. And through the simple act of moving your body, you can write a better biological story, one that supports health, vitality, and longevity. Your thoughts, your emotional states, and your perception of the world do not simply remain confined to your brain. They ripple outward through your biology, affecting the chemistry of your body, and ultimately influencing the expression of your genes. We often separate the mental from the physical, but modern neuroscience and molecular biology have shown us that this division is artificial. What you think and feel becomes what your body does. Your mindset and your experience of stress are not just psychological, they are profoundly biological. When you experience stress, your brain responds by activating the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis. This is a complex hormonal cascade that begins in the brain and ends in the release of cortisol and other stress hormones into your bloodstream. Cortisol is not inherently bad. In fact, in short bursts, it helps you stay alert, mobilize energy, and survive challenging situations. But the problem arises when stress becomes chronic. When cortisol levels remain elevated over time, they begin to influence gene expression in ways that promote inflammation, suppress immune function, and impair cognitive health. This means that if you are under constant psychological stress, whether from work pressure, financial worries, or unresolved emotional conflict, your genes begin to operate differently. Genes involved in inflammation are turned up. Genes that help regulate the immune system and repair cells are dialed down. The body shifts into a state of defense, not growth. Over time, this creates a biological environment that makes you more vulnerable to disease, more prone to anxiety and depression, and less resilient to everyday challenges. Your DNA hasn't changed, but your internal environment has, and your genes respond accordingly. Even more fascinating is the fact that how you perceive a situation, whether you view it as a threat or a challenge, determines your biological response. Two people can go through the same stressful experience, yet their internal reactions can be dramatically different, depending on their mindset. Studies have shown that individuals who interpret stress as something they can handle, something that is part of growth, have very different gene expression profiles than those who see stress as overwhelming and damaging. In the former group, genes related to resilience and cellular repair are activated. In the latter, inflammation and immune suppression dominate. This demonstrates that your beliefs about stress can become biological instructions. But just as negative states like chronic stress can disrupt your genetic functioning, positive psychological states can restore and enhance it. Practices such as meditation, breathwork, and gratitude have been shown to alter gene expression in meaningful and measurable ways. For example, regular meditation has been linked to the downregulation of genes involved in inflammatory processes and the upregulation of genes that promote longevity, cellular repair, and immune competence. Even a short period of mindfulness practice can shift the activity of hundreds of genes, favoring a state of health, balance, and mental clarity. Breathing techniques, especially slow, diaphragmatic breathing, can move the body out of a sympathetic fight-or-flight state and into a parasympathetic rest and digest mode. This shift not only calms the nervous system, but also changes the hormonal signals that cells receive. When stress hormones decrease, genes related to healing and regeneration are more likely to be expressed. Essentially, by changing the way you breathe, you're changing the chemical environment of your cells, and in doing so, you're influencing what parts of your DNA get read and acted upon. Gratitude is another deeply biological force. Studies have shown that people who engage in regular gratitude practices, whether through journaling, reflection, or verbal expression, experience changes in gene expression patterns related to inflammation, immune response, and emotional regulation. The simple act of reflecting on what you're thankful for can activate brain regions that produce dopamine and serotonin, which then influence hormone levels, reduce stress, and ultimately impact gene regulation. Even social connection plays a role. Loneliness and social isolation have been linked to a specific pattern of gene expression called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity, which involves the upregulation of pro-inflammatory genes and the downregulation of genes involved in antiviral response. In contrast, people with strong social bonds show more balanced gene expression, with lower inflammation and improved immune function. So your relationships, your sense of belonging, and your emotional connections are not just good for your mental health, they are shaping your genome in real time. All of this reveals a profound insight. Your mind is not separate from your body. Your psychological world is embedded in your physiology. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, is a signal your body listens to, and your genes respond. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can learn to control your response. And that response has the power to influence the deepest layers of your biology. When you cultivate calm, when you practice mindfulness, when you engage in positive social interaction, you are not just feeling better, you are literally rewriting the biological instructions that shape your health, your aging, and your resilience. Your mindset is not just a mental tool, it is an epigenetic lever. And every time you use it wisely, you are steering the direction of your genetic expression toward a healthier, stronger, and more adaptive version of yourself. The food you eat is far more than fuel. It is a form of information, a set of molecular instructions that speaks directly to your DNA. Every bite you take contains nutrients, compounds, and chemicals that influence which of your genes are turned on or off. This relationship between diet and gene expression is not subtle. It is continuous, dynamic, and deeply influential. In fact, nutrition is one of the most powerful levers we have to influence our biology at the genetic level. When you consume food, you're not simply feeding your muscles or satisfying hunger, you're initiating biochemical conversations with your cells. These conversations happen through signaling pathways, enzymes, and regulatory proteins that respond to the nutrients in your bloodstream. Certain compounds found in foods, such as polyphenols, flavonoids, fatty acids, amino acids, and vitamins, can bind to receptors in the cell and influence which genes get expressed. This is what scientists refer to as nutrigenomics, the study of how food influences gene activity. For instance, foods rich in antioxidants like blueberries, green tea, turmeric, and dark leafy greens contain molecules that actively reduce oxidative stress at the cellular level. Oxidative stress occurs when there's an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants in the body, and it can lead to cellular damage and DNA mutation over time. When you eat antioxidant-rich foods, you're turning on genes that enhance the body's own antioxidant defenses, and turning off genes that promote inflammation and cellular degeneration. One of the most remarkable examples of food affecting gene expression comes from the study of methylation, a key epigenetic process that determines whether certain genes are silenced or activated. This process depends on the presence of nutrients like folate, B12, choline, and methionine, which are found in abundance in foods like eggs, leafy greens, legumes, and liver. These nutrients donate methyl groups to DNA, modifying the way genes are expressed without altering the genetic code itself. Methylation patterns are critical for regulating everything from cell growth to hormone production to brain function, and your diet plays a foundational role in maintaining the integrity of these patterns. The types of fat you eat also matter profoundly. Omega-3 fatty acids, found in foods like fatty fish, flax seeds, and walnuts, have been shown to activate genes involved in anti-inflammatory responses and brain health. In contrast, trans fats and excessive omega-6 fats, often found in processed foods, can activate genes that promote inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. What this means is that your dietary choices can either encourage a genetic profile that supports longevity and vitality, or one that leads to chronic disease and accelerated aging. Even the timing of your eating influences gene expression. Our bodies follow a circadian rhythm, a 24-hour biological clock that governs not only sleep and wake cycles but also metabolism, hormone secretion, and gene activity. Eating late at night or constantly grazing throughout the day can disrupt this rhythm, leading to misalignment in gene expression patterns, particularly those related to insulin sensitivity, fat metabolism, and cellular repair. On the other hand, aligning your meals with your natural circadian rhythm, eating during daylight hours, and allowing for a period of fasting overnight, helps optimize the expression of genes involved in metabolic health and cellular detoxification. One of the most fascinating and empowering discoveries in nutritional science is that food can influence the expression of tumor suppressor genes and genes that regulate cell division and apoptosis, the programmed death of damaged cells. Compounds like sulforaphane in broccoli, resveratrol in grapes, and catechins in green tea have been shown to upregulate detoxification enzymes, promote DNA repair, and inhibit the growth of cancerous cells. These aren't just abstract findings, they are direct demonstrations of how your dietary behavior can engage or suppress genes that have enormous implications for long-term health. The gut microbiome also plays a crucial role in this equation. The trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive system don't just help digest food, they interact with your immune system and influence gene expression throughout the body. A fiber-rich, diverse diet feeds beneficial gut microbes, which in turn produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate is a molecule that influences the expression of genes involved in inflammation, metabolism, and even brain function. When your diet supports a healthy microbiome, it indirectly creates a more favorable genetic environment. Conversely, a diet high in processed foods, sugar, and artificial additives can create dysbiosis, an imbalance in the microbiome that promotes harmful gene expression patterns. Moreover, individual variation in genes, such as those involved in detoxification, vitamin absorption, and metabolism, can dictate how different people respond to the same foods. For instance, some people have a variation in the MTHFR gene that affects folate metabolism, making them more susceptible to DNA damage if they don't get enough folate in their diet. This means personalized nutrition, based on an understanding of your unique genetic makeup, can further enhance the way you influence gene expression for optimal health. Ultimately, food is not neutral. It's not just calories in, calories out. Every meal you eat is a biological event, a chemical signal that triggers a cascade of genetic activity. You are, in a very real sense, shaping your health with every bite. You're instructing your genes on how to behave, how to repair, how to grow, and how to defend. This understanding redefines nutrition. It's not a matter of willpower or diet culture, it's about communication. You are in constant conversation with your DNA, and food is one of your most fluent languages. By choosing whole, nutrient-dense, unprocessed foods, by honoring your body's natural rhythms, and by nourishing a healthy gut, you are writing a better script for your biology. You're not just eating for energy, you're eating to express the best possible version of your genetic potential. And that is one of the most powerful choices you can make every single day.